Welcome to another episode of Inquiring Minds. I'm Steve Harper, and with me as always is the amazing Donna Carlin. Donna, how are you today?
I'm great. I'm really looking forward to today. I know I say that all the time. However, I'm looking forward to today's because it's a little bit of a departure of what we normally talk about, but something that I think we're both dealing with our
Yeah,
clients. So, and maybe personally, I'm not quite sure. Well, I don't have anybody reporting to me, so that might be a
I
little bit
admit
of
nothing.
yeah. So, this is what I have for you. And as we told our listeners, I blindside you with these every single week. So I'm so grateful that you let me do that.
So when they
This
actually see that deer in the headlights look on camera, when they're actually watching the video, they have an understanding of why.
exactly. There you go. So this one is poor leadership is building a great team and doing everything you can to hold on to control. No leader can build a great culture without trust. Give them space, break down roadblocks that impede their progress, but don't control them, because they're going to feel tethered and they're not going to stick around, or
Yeah.
there's going to be mutiny. So I wanted to throw that at you to find out, are you dealing with that? And again, we can translate that to our personal lives as parents. If we want to give our kids space to grow and make decisions and veto everything that they decide to do, or try to control them beyond the point where we're supposed to control them. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, well, it really comes down to two things, doesn't it? Really, trust and a commitment for people to be able to do it on their own, right? And giving them, giving up some of that control to put the control in someone else's hands to accomplish something, right? And that's, like you said, that's true in our personal lives in a lot of ways, with our kids, our significant others, even sometimes our friendships, right? But in business, it can be really challenging because I think leaders have this tendency to want to try and hold on to the reins as tightly as they can. And you understand because sometimes the margin of error can be very slim, right? So, there is not a lot of there's not a lot of leeway. A lot of owners or leaders of teams often give because they're fearful that they if they lose control and things don't work out, that everything could come crashing down. But to your point, how it ties back to the employees, they feel under the thumb. They feel out of their own control and not able to really do what they were hired to do. And that's kind of a critical factor, is you've got to be willing to give up the control and remember that you placed your trust in these individuals for a reason.
And also remember, you're the one that picked the team. And like, for the most part,
Yeah.
you picked them for a reason. Are you validating that reason or invalidating it? That's another question that I ask. And if you're so afraid to let them loose, so to speak, and do their job, what if you're not around one day? I'm
Yeah.
not talking about the being hit by a bus kind of thing. What if there's an emergency and you can't go into work?
Yeah.
And they actually are afraid to take initiative to do their work because they think they're going to get a 2x4 to the side of the head afterwards.
Yeah.
What if, it goes beyond that control in the day-to-day work? How are they enabled to make decisions, enabled to do great work, and being able to take the reins? Because we always say, you're a great leader when the organization is in a better shape when you leave than when you came.
Yes. Absolutely. I've noticed, so I run a software company, two software companies actually, and one of the things that I found in my experience as a leader is that I was very hesitant to do the work that needed to be done because I was so fearful that we would fall off the edge, that we would make the wrong mistake, that we'd invest in the wrong direction from a development perspective. And about a year and a half ago, I sort of gave up all of that control and actually put all of the development, forward looking development efforts in the hands of my COO and sort of our director of product, who interfaces directly with our development team. I used to be incredibly involved and engaged. Now I really don't have a clue what we're doing, right? Other than what they share with me when there's something to share. And what's amazing is when I do start nosing around and I start asking some questions. And I start, looking, kind of below, the surface as to what's happening. What I've actually found is I have this incredible sense of pride that there are so many things that I probably was impeding progress on because I was so nervous about making decisions and doing certain things. Even our CTO that we've brought in on a fractional basis is not even clearing certain things, with me any longer because every time they would do it ended up in a debate. Was it really necessary? Is it really critical? Should we be doing this? And the bottom line is yes. You hired these people to carry the mission forward and do these things so that you don't have to. And in a lot of cases, it's because you don't have the direct experience necessary to make the types of leaps and bounds of progress that they can without you being the impediment to the progress. And so for me personally, it's been huge. And it's also been a real growth moment for me because at the end of the day, I do feel a little isolated in some respects. I feel sometimes left out of the club in a little sort of a little bit of a fashion there. But at the end of the day, it's I have to remind myself that I did this for a reason because we're trying to get from point A to point B. And I know that I've got way smarter people than myself operating. And so, yes, there will be mistakes. Yes, things will not always go well. Guaranteed, we're going to spend more money than I'm ever comfortable spending. However, if I want to make the kind of progress that I know that we're capable of, you have to sort of take the good with the bad and you have to go back to that factor of trust. You've got the right people. Don't be the impediment to their progress.
I remember us talking quite a few episodes ago around the question, are you only doing what only you can do?
Yeah.
And that is a question that a lot of my clients feed back to me when they're about to embark on something that they know they shouldn't be doing because that's the job of the person they hire to do.
Yeah.
And before I say anything, they look at me and they go, "Yeah, yeah, yeah, I know. Am I only doing what only I could do?" And I go, "And what's the answer?" If you're controlling what everybody else is doing, you're not paying attention or expending enough time on what you have to be doing as the leader. I love the analogy from my music years way back when of the orchestra conductor. Brings out the best of every single person in the orchestra, cues them in when they have to be cued in, and facilitates their entry into the piece that they're playing
Yep.
in a way that's seamless. That is, for me, the best definition of a leader that really enables their people to be their best and do their best. Because remember, in an orchestra, if you don't play well, people aren't going to come back to listen to you. That's
Right.
that's the bottom
Right.
line. So you need to be prepared. You need to be top of your game, and you need to have a leader that brings everyone together for the same purpose and the same desired end result. And in this case, if you're controlling, you're erecting those roadblocks, and what your message to them is, I don't trust that you could do the job that I hired you for. So really,
Yeah.
who is the criticism against?
Yeah.
The employee that you're not allowing to do their job, or you
Yeah.
as the person who brought them in because you thought they could do the job?
Yeah.
And how will you be visible? Like if you're not the owner of the company, but you are a senior executive, for example, what is your visibility? How do you want to be seen by the upper leadership if you're constantly controlling what's happening?
Yeah.
And they're going to say, you don't know how to hire people.
Yeah.
Ultimately, you're responsible for that, right? So I find this a fascinating topic.
I do too. One of the things that I got good at probably about the same time I sort of took my hands off the development controls was starting to ask my questions of my team on at every level. Where am I your impediment? where where am I causing the conflict or the blockers? And what I actually found is that because I'm incredibly intuitive in terms of what I like to do and what I like to have my hands in a lot of pies, right? And that makes me really curious, and so I ask a lot of questions, and sometimes those questions come at the worst possible time, right? And they're really not welcomed. And I recognize this in myself when I feel like I'm not getting a satisfactory answer to a question. I ask more questions, right? I have the Donna Carlin model in my head constantly going on around this, but at the end of the day, one of the things that really came out of asking that question was that there's kind of a time and place to ask. There's an opportunity for you to re-engineer the thinking about how you get your information and your updates. And so what we started
Mm.
doing was having a weekly stand-up call, just to give a brief rundown. And I actually don't participate in that. I get actually the notes. I get the ability to see the highlights of what's been handled or what's been discussed with the team, any actions that have been taken, any updates that have been presented. And we do it in such a way that if there is a question, then I put it back in a document that someone with my team actually looks and socializes around, and eventually the answer comes back through my COO. We've streamlined that process, which has then allowed everybody to feel freer, that they're not constantly under worry that I'm going to pop over and say, hey, what's going on with this or what's going on with that. And to me, it has also allowed me to have the freedom in the space to look beyond just being in the weeds with everything and start looking at vision and direction and all the different areas that, as a leader of an organization, you really probably need to put more attention and focus on. And so having those, we'll call them boundaries, right? Or what I like to call the bumper lanes, where we can operate when you go to the bowling alley and they put those bumpers up so you don't go in the gutter. We've got these bumpers up for a reason so that Steve doesn't drive everybody nuts. And to your point earlier, right? When you have somebody who is doing that or won't give up the control or is constantly badgering their team, it creates this culture of mistrust, and nobody wants to work in that environment. And so you lose a lot of critical talent, and it goes all the way back to, why'd you hire them? Right? If you're going to
Right.
chase them off, why did you even bring them in the first place? And so that's a big factor. It's a tough one because I see, and I work with some of my coaching clients. Having that control is a really, especially someone that's in a business that they were used to doing it all, and then they start to add to their team and they're growing. It becomes a big challenge for them, but it's so critical to get to that point where you can sort of take your hands off the wheel and let them drive, because that's what you hired them to do.
That's it. And look at this from a personal perspective as well. There's a lot of parents that listen to our podcast. And if you have teenagers, it's not really for toddlers as much. However, it's always good to give them more and more responsibility for themselves in certain areas that they're not going to compromise their safety on. But what about, your relationships with especially teenagers? How are you demonstrating that you've taught them almost everything that you know to that date anyway, and that you trust them to make decisions for themselves and to live their lives, one of choosing using the lessons that they learn from you instead of trying to control them to such an extent that when they do have a crisis or an issue or peer pressure of something, they don't know how to manage it?
Yeah. Yeah,
What
well,
do
I
you do?
mean, it's an interesting point, because at the end of the day, it really comes down to, again, that open, honest conversation that you need to have with them, right? If I'm setting if I set the expectations, we know what the rules of the game are, and we also know that, just like in work as a leader, I think that you have to constantly remind your people, when you get into a situation where you don't know or you're unsure, or there's that little gut feeling that tells you it's wrong, that's when you raise your hand, right? And I think it applies really with kids as well. If you're a parent, I think the earlier you can instill that in your child, the better that they will be equipped. Ask the questions when when you're unsure, or you don't know, or you feel uncomfortable or unconfident in something that's occurring. And especially in today's world, with teenagers having a completely different set of pressures than what we had growing up, right?
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot of things that are being thrown at them, but you also have to remind them that you trust them. You trust them to ask when they need help. You trust them to make decisions when the opportunities present themselves. That you expect them that they'll make the right decisions. You trust that they will, but you also be there for them if they make the wrong decision and they fall off the track a little bit. You'll be there to help guide them back on. And I think that's really important, especially in those teenage years where it can be very isolating and lonely. And there's this disconnect naturally from your parents because you're trying to grow up, you're trying to find your own way of doing things. But the more that you can reinforce that, you believe in them and you trust in them to make the right calls most of the time, but admit to them that you've not made all the right calls all the time, and that you'll be a little bit humble about that so that they understand mistakes will happen and they're
Right.
inevitable, but that you'll always be there to support them even when things maybe don't work out the way that you had hoped, right?
That's it. They could make the best choice that they could figure out at that moment in time. It doesn't mean they can't make another choice if it wasn't the right one.
Yep,
That's
exactly.
another conversation for another day about the choices we make and how we think that we can change our minds or go back. Like depending on the circumstance, obviously. But if we go down a path and we go, oops, this was not what I thought it was going to be, have to course correct. There's nothing wrong with doing that. If you
No,
stick on
no,
the wrong path,
that's
you
right.
get into
That's
more
right.
and more trouble. So
Absolutely.
for
Well,
another day.
this one's a really interesting topic. I mean, every one that we raise, I think, is, but this one specifically, especially for our business leaders that are out there that are maybe struggling with this, ask your staff, to be honest with you. Are you helping them? Or are you impeding them? And be in a position to be willing to take that feedback because you may actually find you may hear some things that might hurt your feelings a little bit or put you on your back heel, and the reaction that you have is going to be very critical, right? So you don't ask the question and ask them to be honest with you and then get upset with them about being honest. And but that can have such a huge impact to say, look, I want to make sure I'm supporting you and I'm removing as many obstacles as I can from you doing your job, or making progress on that project or whatever the situation might be. But I also want to make sure I'm not one of those challenges that you're dealing with on an ongoing basis. And you have that open dialogue, and don't do it just once. Continually do it until you get to a point where you can see they have buy-in, there is trust, they know that you trust them to do the work that they have in front of them, and that you are willing to give up the control so that they can make the progress that's necessary for your organization. Have that conversation, have that dialogue, and watch how this transforms your culture, how that creates a sense of real value with the people that are working for you. I promise you it will be empowering.
I'm going to add something to that because I think what you said is incredibly important. There's another piece that you could ask. If they say that, you're holding me back, the next question is, in what way could I facilitate things for you so I no longer do that? And could you point it out to me when I'm doing it so that we could discuss it in the moment? Because that's when I'm going to
Yeah.
really pay attention to what I'm doing. And the second part of that is, if you have those ongoing conversations and frequently, and you've made no changes, you're still controlling the situation, trust is going to go down the tubes because they think it's lip service.
Yeah.
So if you're going to have that conversation and here's some tough feedback, then co-create what it might look like for you to create that shift. Ask for feedback from them as to whether or not it's working for them and actually do something differently.
Yep.
That's my 3 cents on the matter.
Yeah, no, I love it. Well, so this is, these conversations are fantastic. They always kick off some really interesting dialogue. So, Donna, how can anyone who, may hear this on the podcast platform, see it on Facebook or YouTube, get engaged in this conversation? Let us know what they took from this episode or any other episodes that we maybe put out there.
So go to our Facebook group, Inquiring Minds with Donna Carlin and Steve Harper. Join the group, share your opinions, let us know how it resonates with you, and if there's topics you want us to go deeper on, or give your perspective on it so that we could discuss it with you. That's the best place to have ongoing discussions. You could obviously go to our YouTube page and all the podcast platforms, and our website's ripplecentral.com for the kink of ripplers, and I'm at donnacarlin.com, Carlin with a K, and you can see more of what we do there. It's wonderful when our listeners share what they get out of them, the conversations they're having, and the enlightenment that they feel because of our conversation. So keep it up.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're super grateful for you guys tuning in. We will be back again with another episode of Inquiring Minds. But until then, Donna, take care.
You too.